Azatireni votum, votum, canicadinha. Azatireni votum, votum, canicadinha.
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 Ele é para votum, azaquere, quere. É chulé para votum, azaquere, quere.
Ele é para votum, azaquere, quere. Chulé para votum, azaquere, quere.
Ele é para votum, azaquere, quere. É chulé para votum, azaquere, quere.
Para votum, azaquere, quere. Chulé para votum, azaquere, quere.
Elegua, elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, alaroye que la bote. Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, alaroye que la bote. Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Camina para Suayo, o mañana para mamá que para Suayo, o mañana para mamá que
Azatireni votum, votum, canicadinha. Azatireni votum, votum, canicadinha.
Elegua, azuquere, quere, meye. Elegua, alaroye que la bote. Açougueiro.
So, herzlich willkommen zur diesjährigen Tour de Lorraine 2021. Ich bin Jalloh Magalhães, bin im Organisationskollektiv der diesjährigen Tour und ich freue mich wirklich. Wir waren jetzt fast ein ganzes Jahr ziemlich intensiv am Organisieren. Ihr kennt das alle. Ging alles drunter und drüber, alles war anders als geplant, aber umso besser sind wir jetzt heute da und freue mich jetzt mit euch in diesen Abend zu starten. Die Tour de Lorraine ist ein jährliches Solidaritäts- und Widerstandsfest, das seinen Anfang im Protest gegen das World Economic Forum im Jahr 2001 daraus entstanden ist und dann mit der Zeit zu einem großen Politfestival sich entwickelt hat. Die Leute aus Bern kennen das alle. Einmal pro Jahr im Januar kann man zusammenkommen, kann man feiern, aber gleichzeitig gibt es inhaltliche Workshops und jedes Jahr geht es um ein anderes Thema. Es geht dabei um Vernetzung, es geht um Austausch, um Aufbau von Alternativen. Und jedes Jahr geht auch der gesamte Erlös, also das, was hereinkommt aus dem Fest oder aus den Spenden, wird dann über das ganze Jahr an emanzipatorische und politische sowie soziale Projekte verteilt. Deshalb gerade an dieser Stelle der Hinweis, bitte spendet auch dieses Jahr wieder etwas, sei es in Form von Kollekte während der Veranstaltung oder dann online auf der Website hat es so einen Spenden-Button. Natürlich ist nun die Durchführung dieses Anlasses, wo es auch Präsenzanlässe geben wird, sehr kontrovers zu sehen. Wir haben uns im Organisationskomitee auch lange damit befasst, ob wir jetzt das in dieser Form durchführen wollen, wie das jetzt durchgeführt wird. Das insbesondere angesichts des Themas, das wir dieses Jahr gesetzt haben, nämlich die Rolle der Schweiz im global und im historischen Kontext des kolonialen Systems. Und noch heute sind Machtstrukturen, aber auch ökonomische Ungleichheiten derart unterschiedlich verteilt, dass auch die Pandemie eben auch die Menschen unterschiedlich trifft. Und wir in dieser Wohlstandsblase hier in der Schweiz müssen uns dem bewusst sein und auch im Umgang damit, das trägt auch gewisse Konsequenzen. Wir haben hohe Fallzahlen und trotzdem hat der Bundesrat entschieden, dass alles wieder geöffnet werden oder teilweise geöffnet wird. Wir halten diese Entscheidung für falsch, aber sie war natürlich auch nur möglich, weil die Hoffnung auf eine rasche Impfung dahinter steckt. Und gerade dort geht es ja auch wieder um eine sehr große Ungleichheit. Es werden nicht alle Länder dieser Welt oder ziemlich wenige Länder dieser Welt mit diesen Impfstoffen überhaupt beliefert. Und es ist doch schon ein Luxus, dass wir uns auf dieser Strategie abstützen können. Das heißt, wir schieben eine kollektive Verantwortung auf das Individuum ab. Und mit dem haben wir uns lange auseinandergesetzt, uns ein ganzes Wochenende wirklich darüber gestritten, was jetzt die richtige Konsequenz daraus ist. Denn gleichzeitig ist die Situation für viele Kunst- und Kulturschaffende, für Leute aus der Gastronomie und aus anderen Bereichen psychisch höchst belastend und auch ökonomisch nicht einfach. Und zwischen diesen widersprüchlichen Bedürfnissen und Realitäten haben wir versucht, irgendeine Lösung zu finden, dass die meisten Anlässe jetzt online stattfinden werden, also auch online stattfinden werden und natürlich bei den Präsenzanlässen auf die nötigen Sicherheitsmaßnahmen geachtet und durchgesetzt wird. An dieser Stelle und angesichts eben der Opfer, die diese Pandemie auch schon gebracht hat, global und vor allem jetzt wieder vermehrt anfallen, eine Schweigeminute einlegen, ja, die hiermit startet. Das als Zeichen eben dieser schwierigen Situation und dass wir dem eben uns auch bewusst sein in unserem politischen Aktivismus. Nun zum heutigen Abend. Ein paar Worte. Dieses Programm wird jetzt eine Woche stattfinden. Es gibt morgen bereits eine Tanzveranstaltung und Poetry Slam, am Sonntag eine Lesung und das geht dann die ganze Woche weiter bis zum Workshops nächsten Samstag, wo die meisten online sein werden. Also checkt die Webseite ab. Dann noch ein paar technische Aspekte für alle, die dies per Stream oder Zoom mitverfolgen. Also wenn ihr irgendwie interaktiv mit dabei sein wollt, dann könnt ihr über Zoom Fragen im Chat stellen, dort werden sie gesammelt und wir versuchen sie dann eben hier in die Runde nach vorne zu bringen. Für die Übersetzung kann man dies auf Zoom auswählen. Es gibt dort einen Button mit Dolmetschen, der ist unten rechts so eine Weltkugel und dort kann man verschiedene Sprachen auswählen. Bitte schaltet auf Stumm. Und noch ein wichtiger Hinweis, diese Veranstaltung auch auf Zoom wird aufgenommen. Also wenn ihr irgendwie nicht erscheinen wollt, schaltet eure Kamera ab. Ein paar Worte zum Inhalt. Eben Kolonialismus ist das Überthema. Und wir haben dieses Jahr wirklich, war es ja ein langer Vorlauf, und wir haben das auch als Anlass genommen, uns eben auch inhaltlich damit auseinanderzusetzen. Wir haben eine Inhaltsgruppe, aber auch im ganzen Organisationskollektiv viele Diskussionen geführt. Als Beispiel schon nur der Titel, der war ursprünglich anders. Das ist das Ergebnis quasi eines laufenden Prozesses, der jetzt über ein Jahr stattgefunden hat und ist natürlich noch lange nicht in Stein gemeißelt. Wir sind uns bewusst, dass alle, die wir hier leben, in irgendeiner Weise vom Wohlstand der Schweiz profitieren und ihrem Geschäftsmodell auf Kosten der Rest der Welt. Es ist seit ein paar Jahren befassen sich Forschende, aber auch AktivistInnen intensiv mit der Schweiz oder anderen europäischen Ländern und ihrer Rolle im kolonialen System. Mittlerweile ist es so ziemlich in der Mitte der Gesellschaft angekommen, aber es besteht eine große Unsicherheit, wie wir damit umgehen sollen. Wir müssen neue Formen finden, wie transnationale Solidarität entstehen können und wie alternative Geschäftsmodelle entwickelt werden. In diesem Netz der kolonialen Kontinuitäten gingen und gehen auch immer verschiedene Formen des Widerstands einher. Und genau damit wollen wir uns heute Abend befassen. In dieser Auftaktveranstaltung wollen wir versuchen, diesen Geschichten einen Raum zu geben. Ziel ist es, darauf aufbauend eine gemeinsame Sprache zu entwickeln und versuchen, Gegenwärtiges zu verändern und Kommendes neu zu erträumen, Utopien etwas klarer zu sehen. Damit habe ich genug gesprochen und freue mich jetzt, den Panelistinnen das Wort zu übergeben. Izabel, da bist wird heute Abend durch den Abend moderieren. Sie ist beim CFD, beim feministischen und verantwortlich für feministische Projekte und wird auch gerade ein paar Worte zu sich selbst sagen. Vielen Dank für alle, die mitgewirkt haben, vor allem auch das Organisationskomitee. Ich wünsche euch einen guten Abend.
Thanks, Jalloh. Dear friends, good evening. I would like to welcome everyone, the friends who are in front of the cameras, behind the cameras, and in front of the screen watching us tonight. It's a real pleasure to be opening this temporary community experience that we call Tour de Lorraine, with the theme Tour décolonial. The Tour décolonial is a collective project that finds its force in a dance program that is itself a contradiction to the colonial project. The Tour, the people who offer movies, workshops, lectures, performances, and the people who stand beside me tonight, each one in their own way extend an invitation to you all. They invite us to have the courage to unlearn what we have learned, to transgress, to overcome the barrier between body and head, and to take action. Where I come from, and I imagine you have had the same experience, when we are invited into someone's home, we ask for permission, we enter with respect and humbleness. For this invitation, the same is valid. In exchange, we are welcome, fed, and we leave enriched. For some, questioning the colonial project is a choice. For many, it's the only way to exist, to defend our humanity, ways of living, and cosmologies. However, for us all, stopping colonialism and promoting reconciliation with nature and the knowledge of colonized and marginalized people may be the only way, in the words of Ailton Krenak, to postpone the end of the world. You probably may be confused by the fact that we are all speaking in English tonight, despite the fact that none of us, or most part of us, don't have English as the first language, and knowing what this language represents and perpetuates. Nevertheless, tonight, we are hacking this language to create a common ground and to be able to listen to what everybody here has to say. A group of translators are kindly offering their talent to allow us to understand ourselves despite our language barriers, and I thank you for that. We are all invited to engage against colonialism and its continuities, be it the dehumanization of people, capitalization of nature, or the militarization of states and borders. However, we do not do this out of the same experience, biography, and with the same luggage. We do not occupy the same place of speech within the colonial project. We call in Portuguese lugar de fala, the place I'm talking from. So I will invite the people who are in this podium tonight to introduce themselves from the places of speech and to share with us their experiences and words. The goal of this podium is to give the opportunity to the public to listen three important persons that question the colonial project in their lives, in their work, activism, existence, and reflect on alliances and actions. Before I'm passing the word to Vanessa first, I introduce myself by exposing my own lugar de fala. My name is Izabel Barros. I'm a migrant, a person of color, a cis heterosexual woman. I answer by the pronouns she and her. I'm from Piauí and from São Paulo. I descend from indigenous and African nations that because of the colonialism, I have never learned their names. I'm descend from European migrants. I was raised and educated by strong and powerful women. I'm a historian. I'm an anti-colonial feminist and activist, and I owe the most part of my knowledge and anti-colonial thinking and praxis to the Quilombo communities from Maranhão. Now I would like to pass the word to Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Izabel, for the invitation to engage with you tonight. And of course for setting this up, to the organizing team. Jalloh, thank you also for this introduction, and yeah, to the whole organizing team, and particularly also the translators. I think translation is such an important project in terms to make spaces and conversations accessible. When I thought about the lugar de fala, or how I want to actually engage with this, or because I think there's so many fragments and traces when it comes to positionalities, right? And sometimes things get lost, and it depends on in which context we're actually speaking. So I thought about two traces. One is the trace of experiences and social positioning. So my experience is shaped by my growing up in Germany in a white middle-class town, being the child of a white mother from a middle-class background and a black father from the US, a descendant actually of enslaved people, but also very resistential people from a working-class background. So this actually very much shaped my experiences in terms of growing up. And these were experiences of white domination, but also citizenship, and also to a certain extent class privilege. I had a strong tie, and still have, with my family in the US, black working class family, highly criminalized, many of them in prison, particularly uncles and cousins. So actually forms of structural violence run through my family, but also forms of, with regard to policing, imprisonment, criminalization in general. So these were actually things that were part of not my direct experiences, but experiences that were important to people that were actually very important to me, and for whom I have a lot of love. And at the same time, they urged me to ask questions about, like, okay, why is this? Why is this kind of, I don't know, the police as an occupying force, like, I don't know, hindering my parts of my family and their friends to move? Or why isn't it possible to see my uncle when I come to visit? So here we see that actually lived experiences pose certain questions around conditions, and around questions of who can participate, but also who actually has to go through which kind of hardships. So what I was also confronted with was particularly also the criminalization, but also the exploitation of my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, but also their strength. So that's actually where black feminism comes in. I was a black feminist before I knew the word black feminism, in terms of having a particular analysis and critique of the hardships and the violence that people have to endure in their lives. So in Germany, where I then actually grew up, because I didn't see my family that often, I became involved in various forms of activism, actually from a very young age. There was much inclusion from the white left, but I was fortunate enough to find other black people, people of color, migrants whose parents migrated to Germany, who also positioned themselves on, I would not say forcefully the left, but positioned themselves at the side of social justice. And that was helpful because Germany can be very isolating. I mean, it's white dominated, but it was really helpful to actually come together, think together, do stuff together, and share experiences. And that's also where I found out, or where I actually learned, that even the black experience is shaped by such a variety. So my friends were actually people whose parents have fled from Eritrea, Sudan, parts of the west of Africa. So I realized, okay, actually blackness is a very, has many shades. And out of this, I would say, now comes the other trace I would like to talk about, which is the trace of political positioning. Because I do think that social positioning and political positioning have a relation, but they don't fall together. They're not the same. So in terms of political positionings, through these experiences, but also beyond these experiences, I was engaging more and more in projects of social justice, and I was also interested actually in the histories of these struggles. So a lot came from the US in terms, so I engaged with the Black Power movement, Black resistance movements, anti-colonial movements, and tried to learn from these. I was particularly interested in the contributions of feminists, which were often erased even in this history. When I was dealing more with questions of sexuality and discovered my own bisexuality, I was more interested in the question or the contributions of queer people within black movements. But I was also wondering, what's with Europe? What's the deal with Europe? And then there was not much at that time, at least for me, not much to find in regard to Germany. One of the first contexts I was looking to was the UK. And then I learned about the Black Brixton Women's Group, the Black Panther in the UK, and of course some of the anti-colonial formations in France and other contexts. And then there were traces, fortunately, to Germany. And then I engaged more with that kind of history. And I'm saying this because I find it important to consider our struggles in a legacy of struggles. No one has to reinvent the wheel. A lot were just part of this kind of journey of struggle. And this struggle is contextual in a way. And sometimes it's hard to find these legacies of struggles in various contexts. In the German context, it was hard, although the black presence in Germany goes way, way back, and even in terms of the struggles. So I think I would say much of these lived experiences were actually a starting point in terms of what I bring and maybe how I am in this space, but they were also in a strong relation of a kind of political journey in terms of trying to understand the world, but also engage or contribute, always collectively, never alone, to projects of radical transformation.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Vanessa. I think we go directly to you, Jonas.
Thank you, Izabel, for the invitation. Thank you, everybody here, for the organization. So, my name is Jonas Van Holanda. I don't usually say my last name, Holanda, because I don't like it, but also I think it's interesting to start my speech with this. Holanda, it's like Holland, Netherlands. So it's exactly, I'm marked with the name of the colonizer in my surname. So I think it's interesting also to start speaking that. I'm from Ceará. I'm from Fortaleza, Ceará. It's in the northwest of Brazil. And my region, it was colonized by Holland. So that's why I have this beautiful name, Holanda. Actually, it's not the real name of my family, but as Izabel said, a lot of things in colonized countries, they were lost. For example, our own names and our stories and families. So, yes. And I'm a trans person. I think it's interesting also to speak that I'm not a trans man, but I'm a trans person, because my transition, it's not about transitioning to a gender, a binarity gender. Like, I'm not a woman, but I'm not a man as well, because my transition is a refusal. Actually, I really enjoy that it's really clear that it's not a gender transition. It's a political transition, actually. And I decided to transitioning the white cis world. It's more easy like that. So it's a refusal, actually. So I think it's I'm not here to ask to be a man, but also not trying to be a woman. And I think it's also interesting to put that the political questions about being a man and being a woman, it's an heritage of colonialism as well, because we've learned how to be, actually we've learned how to be a white man and how to be a white woman. Like, if you really want to be part of the system, like the rest, it's the dissidency. And because white cis people, it's the universal body. So I think it's a refusal for that as well. Like, I refuse to be part of this. And what else? I'm an artist. I'm a migrant as well. I'm here in Switzerland for 2 years now. I came in 2019 to spend 6 months, but after the 6 months ended, COVID arrived, so I'm stuck here. And then I decided to restart my studies, because I never had the opportunity to finish it in Brazil. Because I couldn't agree, I never agreed like with being in a university, actually, because I had just the opportunity to learn in university the white cis knowledge, and I didn't want it to. So I didn't want it to read his art story and geography and history of art and story of Europe. Like, it's really simple. So I didn't finish my studies. It's been 10 years that I'm trying to, and finally, with 31 years, I think I'm gonna finish in June. So yes, and I come from Fortaleza, but I think it's interesting as well to think that for me, I own a lot of things that I am today, of being in the world, because of my parents and because of my family, because of my ancestors. But also, I ran from this place. Like, I'm here. Before I was in another place, and before I was in another place, and before I was in another place. I'm always changing my geography, because as well as in Fortaleza, I didn't felt part. So I'm used to say that actually I live in a transition, and it's not a thing that you do like a gender transition. Like I'm not something before and now I'm something else. I'm living in this transition. It's like it's my home. It's transitioning. So it's an endless thing as well. There is no end in transitioning. So this is my home as well, my transition. And what else can I say? I'm looking forward to know more about this evening with you. That's it.
Thanks a lot for sharing, Jonas. I'm passing directly the word to Noor.
Thank you, Izabel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation. Jonas' story about the family, about the last name, actually reminded me of my own last name. My name is Noor Alamery, and the last name Alamery is the name of the world's most dangerous terrorist, which was declared by the government of the United States in 2020. But despite that, for me, the name has a very special meaning because an old ancient Arabic princess was called Layla Alamery. And sometimes I feel like I can relate to her. She was also somehow doesn't fit in this whole society and this whole world. So it sometimes feels relieving to know that there is somebody I can relate to who lived the same circumstances in a different lifetime. Lugar de fala, or the place of speech, is the place from which I speak. From what place in relation to decoloniality am I speaking from? As a matter of fact, my lugar de fala goes far beyond political terms and identities. It started the very first time I had questions. Exactly that one time where I was in the second grade and where we were taught that we must love God more than our parents. And my first reaction was like, but no, I love my mother more than anything. The teacher had the whole class laugh at me back then. And I had to spend the rest of primary school realizing that I am going to hell because I love my mother. It's that moment where I first said no, where everyone thought there was something wrong with me, and where I didn't care much about going to hell. We're here to address decoloniality and resistance, and me being the resistance. I couldn't help but resist to talk about it in fancy wording and sophisticated vocabs. For me, this childhood story is decoloniality. It's to detach from that overall structure of knowledge in order to engage in an epistemic reconstitution, a reconstitution of everything. And while we're here today to talk about resistance, I was asked to write a speech. And to write a speech, you need to have answers to current relevant questions. In fact, I don't have answers. I have wonderings of the surroundings, and sometimes I get the impression that I will never find the answers. So this won't be a speech. This would be a general wondering of what the hell. And one of the things that keeps my mind busy is actually the resistance of the resistance. Because often when we're introduced to a term, such as coloniality, we get to recognize the acts related to them. And our acts of resistance will follow from that. We will realize what behaviors originate from that term, and that the way the system is constructed is an extension of that long history. But what's often not mentioned is that in the field of activism, resistance is a pretty colonialist term itself. To talk bluntly without sugarcoating, for most, activism is a free time activity and it's quite exclusive. We don't support colonialist capitalist institutes such as McDonald's, and we shame people from eating there because we can afford to buy organic, regional, seasonal tomatoes. But if there's an opening job at the place we work at, our standards suddenly become very systematic, very capitalistic. A few times where I want to join a certain movement or a place, I'm often welcome to be the woman of color in that group. And instantly I get to be labeled as that. And that label is not removable. It's an advertisement of diversity and inclusivity. But if you take a look at the administrative side, you rarely see much color there. See, the scale of your resistance is not measured by your thoughts and insights. It is determined by how much engagement does your suffering bring to the project when they post it on Facebook. I often say that I don't want to be labeled as a woman of color. And as much as I love my skin color, I mean, it's really great to go out in the sun in summer. I am way more than that. I am Noor. My name means the light at the end of the tunnel in Arabic. I have a weird interest in psychology, and that concerns my therapist a lot. I like to learn languages, and I'm a very hardcore fan of FC Barcelona. My general wondering goes out to all the so-called diversity advocates, the world changers, the anti-decolonization out there. Why, out of all these things, why out of all the aspects, do you have the urge to keep reminding me that I am a person of color? Why do you want my way of activism to complement the most recent political term that you've learned? Why do you expect me to think above you and act below you? Why am I a shiny decoration to your project, to attract people but never a main element? Are there no more ladders than my suffering to climb so you can gain your success? And propose yourself as a heroic savior. So many questions. And my lugar de fala started the first moment I've had questions. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Noor. Thank you all. I think I could stay here and hear your stories the whole night. And I'm so proud of having gathered like so many amazing people in this podium tonight. And thanks so much for the Tour de Lorena for this possibility. I think I would start with some questions, and after we could pass to the public. We have this experience we are having here, it's already a contradiction to the colonial project, because I don't see normally so many podiums where people speak for themselves and share their stories and their identities and their struggles in relationship to the movements, to this colonial project and where we are in now. So I feel really glad for that, and glad for having the opportunity to hear that and to share with others. I think the first question I would like to do, it's a very simple one, because and it touches directly the thematic of Tour de Lorena. It's like what it means, decoloniality, decolonial to you, what it's this big word means. And I really would like to start with Jonas to answer this one. And I think you could follow if you feel like.
Yes, I have a friend, I already told Izabel that I have a friend, her name is Cecilia Moya Rivera. She's from Chile, but she lives in Geneva with me, and she's a great artist as well. And she has a text, the name of the text is Distancia, ¿cómo se llama? Distance has more than 10 letters. It's a text that she presented for her master's. And in this text, she said that decolonial and decoloniality, it's a word, actually, only a word, because it's a word made by white cis people in Europe, by maybe to understand better their position in the world. So they could like get a relation with the colonialidade in general, because they now have access to the past of the violence of the coloniality. So I think it's important to know that decolonization is also a word created by a system, oppressive system, maybe for the system to feel better. And of course, I think it's different as well, the way that we have a relationship with this word, and how white cis European people have a relationship with this word. It's completely different. And yeah, it's a word like magic, I think. I think we all know this word in English, magic, and or mágica in Portuguese, or mágica en espagnol, magique en français. And it's also a word. And what I've learned about magic, it's actually everything that the white knowledge cannot understand. So what they cannot explain, they call it magic. So a lot of religions, they deal with magic because they just cannot find words to describe or to understand in their, they cannot get related to it. So it means that it's magic. It's easy, like the word decolonization as well. And it's like to believe in the invisible things, like something that you cannot see, but you can feel. This is magic as well, maybe. And yeah, I think I would like to start as saying that décolonial, it's a word that it's practice it's practical to have this word as well. But maybe it's good to have this word as well to recognize the past, like here in Europe. So I hope so.
Yeah, I think just like to getting a bit on the line what you said, Jonas. The indigenous communities, Quilombos communities, like people in resistance, like now for 530 years, didn't needed this word to construct an anti-colonial experience. And I think what you said before, Vanessa, it was really beautiful that you could be considered Afro-feminist without even knowing what the word means. So it's like this function of words and how words work. So I don't know if you would like to continue like on the decoloniality. What's decolonial? For you or for you?
Okay, maybe Thank you. I'm really struck by the beauty of your words. It's really, first of all, I want to say that. Thank you. I'm really honored to be in this conversation with you. Decoloniality, I think, to me, is hollow until it's filled with something. And I think that's like, because we can use, I mean, it belongs in a way also to a variety of freedom projects. Like I come more from, I would say, an abolitionist legacy, and I'm trying to figure out what would the relationship be or not be. But I do know words matter, but the way how they matters too. And I think with decolonize, particularly in the European context, but we've seen this in the US before. There's this wonderful text by Yves Tuck and Wayne Young who make a claim to say, well, actually decolonize is not a metaphor. When we refer it in a settler colonial context to indigenous struggles, it means one thing first, land back. It's a very material thing. And they were criticizing how it was actually, okay, decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the university, and they were thinking, well, okay, you know, the text is actually decolonize is not a metaphor. And I think I don't only want to talk about what it's not, but I would definitely say, well, it shouldn't be a metaphor. It shouldn't be an easy issue. It shouldn't be a feel-good thing. Because like Frantz Fanon said, decolonization is a violent process. I'm not calling for all forms of violence here, but to really destroy something is a violent process, right? So it's actually not something to feel good with about. So I would say how I approach this as part of the anti-colonial project, as part of the abolitionist project, as part of liberation, is a practice, but also a kind of commitment we make to the world, to the people we are in relationships, and maybe also to the people of the world, because it's not only about our communities, or it's not only about our self-understanding. And I do think what I'm a bit concerned about when it comes to the European context is I see it often circulating in kind of mainly middle-class formations, like, for example, the whole thing about decolonizing the university. Knowledge is important when it comes to colonial projects in plural, but the material realities, like it was a project of power, of super exploitation. We all know this. Knowledge played a role, but not the only role. And I think it's important when we think, for instance, of the university. That's the place where I work. I'm a teacher. I try at least to teach and to engage with students, and I'm learning every day. There, I see it's important to, or what I see there is like it's more geared to the question of the curriculum or to how we teach than, for instance, to the question of the labor relations of the migrant people, often black, often brown, cleaning that space, right? So for me, the question of decolonization is first of all one of grounded solidarity. And here I come to what you said, Noor, exactly, like can you engage with the person that is eating at McDonald's, that not has the cash or even the access to other forms? Like what would it mean to, and here I'm quoting Sylvia Wynter, marry our thoughts with the conditions of what Fanon called le damné, the wretched. What does it mean to make a principled commitment in terms of really radically transforming the worlds we live in? So for me, you can call this decoloniality, or you can also call it another name. For me, it's important like what comes out of that. And how we really engage with radical transformation. This is also something where we, I think, have to like constantly reflect ourselves. But I think we're in a crucial moment, because this moment is not just about participation, right? We've seen, I mean, I like have a close tie to the US context. We have a class struggle going on within the black community. We've seen a black president bombing the whole world with his administration, right? So decolonization is really about radically transforming and not including or participating in some kind of systems.
Thank you.
At the same time knowing that we're in these systems, but there I thought it was so beautiful how you talked about refusal. And I think it's then also the question of how can we refuse when we're inside these systems and to create something completely different.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, radical transformation. Yeah, how it's for you? This I don't know if we have the antidote. The book that was published from La Torre de Lorena is the first magazine who starts with a glossar. No, like before people start to read the text, they have a glossar with all the names. How it's for you? What's decoloniality and decolonial?
Decoloniality for me is the art of saying no when everybody thinks that you should be grateful. That's it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's the refusal, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the concept of being grateful that's often, it's a consequence. Like me being a refugee, for example, I'm often told that I should be grateful because I live here, because I enjoy, because I'm not dead, basically. But if you take a deeper look at the whole situation, you'd notice that none of this was my choice. So what should I be grateful for? And even the condition that I'm living right now is a series of foreign policies that caused me to live this way. So just say no.
Sure, and it's what Vanessa said about violence, no? Like the answer you maybe give, your refusal is seen as violence, but this asking for being grateful is never seen as violence. Or like the best way to be blocked in a conversation is here, but you don't like to live here. You know, that's...
At least you're alive.
Yeah, this, exactly. So yeah, I think this kind of violence, like what Paulo Freire says, this important educator we have, sometimes violence is a form of love. It should be considered as a form of expression of love when it's legitimate. Yeah, thank you very much. So I think I would like to go, we already said before, a bit about, like Vanessa already said, of how it's to try to do this work or have this perspective from Europe. I don't know if you would like to continue on that, like how is to propose decoloniality or anti-colonial perspective from inside the beast's belly, from inside of Europe. I think, I don't know, Jonas, because you have the experience of this South perspective, if you would like to go on that.
I think, just wanted to make another point with you as well. When you did the reference of Fanon, to say that the process of decolonization it's a violence as well, and unlearning it's really violent as well, but it's like transitioning. I think it's endless. You don't stop. You just go on because it's like actually you don't have an option. You need to go on because it's your life. It's not. I think it's the word activist sometimes that bothers me. Like, why I'm an activist? I'm trying to live my life, and yes, this is being activist because I have no choice. I have to struggle it. So, yes, it's unlearn, and also like to forget things, to forget coloniality, to remember or to create other possibilities of being in this world. I think it's a big step already, like forgetting, because actually I think coloniality is also a gesture that we keep on repeating. It's like Lucas Veiga, a psychologist from Brazil, he says, each one of us, we have our own fictions. So if we think like that, then coloniality is also a fiction. And it's a collective fiction because everybody repeats it for centuries. So why not create other fictions for ourselves that we can really live and not survive, like for instance. And yes, I really believe in it's not answering your question, but I think also like the creation of fictions, I think it's part of the refusal, as we all said before, because to refuse coloniality, to refuse being grateful for all of the violence that they put on us, it's also the beginning to construct a new world. And I will start answering your question by something that I've heard a lot this past 1 year, I think, or 1 year and a half of COVID, but also before. I've been in Europe for 2 years right now, so in Switzerland, and that everybody's talking about end of the world, and we are living in the end of the world, and I was like, Which
it
world?
hits them one time, and then it's the end of the world, right? It's like other
now
people have
it's
been
the end
living
of
in
the world.
crisis since centuries, and now you think it's the end of the world. Sorry.
Yes, this is a... Which end of the world? Like our world, it's ended like first centuries. They don't exist anymore. So now your world, it's collapsing because of yourselves, and now you're creating like you're dealing with reality. And I think the first time I've heard that, it was in a conference in Lisbon with Ayrton Krenak as well. I was crying so hard after. It was a really crazy conference. I was in Lisbon for 6 months. That's how I got into Europe. Actually, I got not a scholarship, but a prize from a museum to study in Europe for 1 month. And then, voila. And then I went to this conference of Ayrton Krenak, and he was together with Viveiro de Castro, Eduardo Viveiro de Castro, he's an anthropologist from Brazil as well. And it was really weird because the conference started with Eduardo Viveiro de Castro, that he's an amazing writer, of course, but they are opposites at the same time, because I think Viveiro de Castro, he speaks a lot about the experience that Krenak has or had. And when I started to listen to Viveiro de Castro, it was a lot of things, like it was really fast, he was speaking really fast all the time. I was like, okay, I have to take note of that. And after, it was the turn of Ayrton Krenak to speak. And he was speaking so low and so paused that it calmed me down, but it also I felt like crying so much, because I think he was trying to say that he has another time there. Like he doesn't have the same time of Eduardo Viveiro de Castro, for example. And I think it's beautiful as well to see how we build time, like the idea of time. This time that we are living in right now in Switzerland, like we are 8 and a half.
Oh, don't remember me. I will have to stop you.
But also about this matter of time, I think we are living in a white cis time. This is the time of that they built, that we are living in. So it's also living in a paradox all the time, because it's like it's not our time. We will create our time, or we'll go back to our times, or in our ancestors, or I say ancestors, but I like to say that I have monsters as ancestors as well, because I couldn't be here today if I didn't met the travestis and the trans people that were in the past, for example. And I know that they couldn't be here as well, that I can't. And even though we were here, and but I think it's also, I think in the beginning of the encounter of today, we were like speaking about ourselves. We did this mandala, and I think it's amazing that we are all here today, living people, but there is a lot of dead people here as well with us. So I think it's always good to celebrate our dads. So it's just a reminder. And the question was...
Doesn't matter, Jonas, just...
No.
I'm going to pass the ball to Noor, actually, because you were talking about temporality, and as well Vanessa was talking beautifully about like the history behind all this fight, and you too, you know, like that behind us there are lots of people that we didn't invent the wheel. and about temporality, time, that Jonas said that we are living in this cis, heteronormative, white time, and you were speaking about the white agenda that you have to fit in so many agendas. I don't know if you want to go, or just ignore my question and go on somewhere else, or just.
I would love to answer your question, which was about fighting from inside the beast's belly.
Yeah.
Well, to be completely honest, how it works is that when you are under it, you don't quite realize it. Where I was in Iraq, I wasn't whatsoever familiar with the term. And the fact that when we were there, we always had to feel less. We had to feel always less, and that the West is this mighty place, and we are always the lesser version. When I came here, I was shocked that I was quite as intelligent and as motivated and as good and as human as these people. It was this shock that you had after years of realizing that you were living a lie. It was that moment of realization that I am also a human and I am equal. So I think I wouldn't have realized this if I didn't come here and realize that all of these problems that I used to suffer are a result coming from here, of the policies, of the actions, of the way of thinking, of the stupid questions that I get asked most often, like, did you come here riding a camel, or did you have a TV back home? Or I once had a date and the guy really asked me while I was eating, do you have forks and knives in Iraq? So if it wasn't for these small details, I wouldn't have realized what this is all about. But if I was back there, I don't think I would ever realize it. I would just continue to be under pressure and think that I am wrong. So yeah, of course it's possible to do it from here.
Thanks. Don't know, Vanessa, if you want to react to that? Or
I think
just
maybe
anything
briefly,
else?
I would say it's possible and it's necessary. I mean, knowing that it's speaking like that on a global scale, people are differently positioned with regards to these realms, and of course Europe, but also the US is like the heart of empire, so to speak. And I think there, even more, but I can think of two reasons now that I think are important when regard to engaging in these struggles within the belly of the beast. Is first of all, the belly of the beast has forced many people here, right? Through the ongoing projects of colonization. I mean, we talk a lot about remembrance, but this shit is ongoing, right? And it's like homes are destroyed. I mean, Noor, you talked about it, like the production of refugees. It's not being a refugee. Like, people are rendered refugees, they're rendered migrants, they're forced to flee through wars, through environmental racism, through all these catastrophes. There we come to the question of who has lived through a crisis, right? It was so, I mean, there you really see it's also a question of I don't want to use the word dissonance, but it's really I was sometimes when people talked about Corona, and I was like, look, you had Ebola, you had all these kinds of diseases ravaging communities, and their communities have also had learned some kind of knowledge. Europe is even too ignorant to engage with these kind of knowledge people had with relation, particularly also queer folks when it comes to the HIV pandemic, right? To care for people who are also, where you don't know what is actually going on. Mm-hmm. So, but to bring this back, so Europe also is still producing or forcing people to be in the belly of the beast. It's not inviting, or it's not well, you should be thankful. It's enforcement in a way. And then, so these people need to do these struggles anyway. Like you said, it's not about being an activist, it's the struggle for life in various forms. But then I think also, it is also the belly of the beast where differently positioned these struggles need to take place. We know this from the various histories of struggles. It was important for the abolition of apartheid in South Africa to have transnational, international solidarity. It was even important when it comes to fighting against war. Here is the center of these kinds of war-making machines, right? And these kinds of politics of war, militarization, expansion of borders. We need to do this here. So for me, it's not a question. I mean, it's really, we need to learn from the experiences of those who are positioned in the global south, particularly poor, particularly like impoverished in terms of socioeconomic, but like with these knowledges, but I think we need to do it from here. It's a responsibility.
It's also a privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The invitation was launched to that something must be done here, so take action. So I don't know if you, okay, like taking action. So I would like to know from you if you could give us some examples of actions with a decolonial perspective. How do you work? How do you rely? How do you leave a fight against the colonial project? How can you tell any of you?
I stopped using compliments when I direct my speeches to people. I started to say fuck you more often, very publicly. I think the world is very powerful. I just like it. I don't know if it's powerful or not. But one of my main issues in life is the fact that I cannot access university or higher education, even though I have completed my high school second education, but still it's not recognized. I also have difficulties in fulfilling the required forms and doing one here. So I had to take other ways, and I quite find that very unfair that people have to live this, because so for example, the University of Bern offers like a hoorzaal where you can attend sessions for hearings, but you are not allowed to be registered as a student, which I find very funny, because they realize there's a problem, but they choose to have a stupid solution. And it's quite annoying, to be honest, because the people going to the university also acknowledge this problem and not many actions are being taken. So one of the activities that I want to do, but not really doing right now, is to establish kind of a force or a political tool where I can actually, or we can actually start to make real life change and not just a couple of demos or Facebook posts. Because to be completely honest, we're quite tired of saying things, we're quite tired of talking. We've been talking for really way too long and nothing is getting changed. So if we keep doing this pace of just talking, I don't think much would change, but we need to start taking actions. Yeah, I don't know what kind of actions I will be doing, to be honest, but I'm working on it. But the whole main idea is that everybody realizes the problem, everybody realizes that the solutions given are very stupid, but also everybody's enjoying the privilege of having access, so it doesn't matter that much. So I think my main goal is to actually mobilize people who are not enjoying the privilege and actually, I don't know, make a force, blow some shit up.
Invitation is there out to the public?
I think of course refusal, it's on the tops of the process of decolonization for me. But also I started to learn French. I live in the French part of Switzerland. I live in Geneva. And I started learning French when I decided that I didn't want just to be angry all the time, of being here, of not, I was all the time angry. I was pissed all the time when I got in Europe. And I decided not to be only angry, because I wanted to live, I wanted to be other things than being the angry person all the time. And that's when I started to learn French. And I said that, of answering your question with that, because actually when I started to learn French, I started to speak the language of the oppressor, of the colonizer. And right now it's a tough exercise, because I have to shut up, because I cannot speak everything. Like, I cannot have a discussion the same way that I have a discussion in Portuguese from Brazil, for example. So it's a good exercise of listening as well. Sometimes just being shut up to listen. But I'm doing this because I want to speak the language of the oppressor, because I want the doors to be open. Because here we have a lot of things in Switzerland, in Europe, and I said a lot of things because at the same time that I think living in this belly of the monster, they're forcing a lot of people to do that. But it's crazy because it's also like a dream of a lot of people in the South. It's the dream of the colonization. Mm-hmm. It's a reality.
They told us how good it was here.
Yes, they told us, exactly. Propaganda. And but actually to hack, I think it's a really good start to decolonize. I don't use a lot of this word. I like anti-colonial project. I think it's better because we are not in the way. We are aiming to do something that is practical. It's real. So we all have to be anti-colonial. We have to destroy this world to build others, to build other fictions. But I think the coloniality cannot listen if we are speaking in these words like that. So we have to speak their languages to introduce, not to introduce, but to hack, to create, to manipulate and to ask things back. Because everything that we have here in Europe was stolen. Or if it's not stolen, it was only built or made by the forces of others, of the people who are in the South, people who are in Africa, in South America, in Asia. So
our mountains are in this microphone here,
yes.
Everywhere.
So, but it's really violent process as well to hack, because you have to deal with the enemy all the time. You have to talk with them. And actually, I don't want to do that all the time.
You don't have to?
No, not at all. And then I decided I do that as well because I think it's important for my path. Because like that I can open doors as I am talking with the colony. I can open doors because I think that's how it works. If we have people in the institutions or people in like directors or managers or teachers and etc., and we can open doors for the others to come. And it's about that. This is a collective fight. I'm not here alone. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this because someone did before me, and I want to do this for the next. So it's about open doors as well, collectively, like to propose a different approach. And but yes, I think actually to try to be happy, it's amazing. Like just not get into the line of surviving all the time. And it's such a big privilege to do that, actually. Like to decide I want to be happy. Like it's, you know, it's crazy.
It's revolutionary.
Well, and well.
I don't know, Vanessa, if you want to complete or to react.
It was around the practices, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, well, I really think it's in relation, like what is the everyday of these practices. So I do think organizing is important. That's just my way of, but we organize in various ways and in various realms. I think what I'm like currently or in some years now engaged, and this works always with people and never alone. I think it's also very like hard, it's a hard question because I think it has movements and organizing comes through collective processes.
Sure.
So, but I'm trying to engage in particularly abolitionist movements around policing prisons and make these connections also to borders, because I think what we definitely see is an expansion of the carceral state, not only here but also in relation to an international form. And there will be, and we already see that it's like also, although super exploitation is still happening, what is also increasing is the killing and the violence against populations that are rendered surplus. We can look at the Mediterranean, but we also can look at the Lagas, but we can also look at how people are actually policed in their everyday. So that's for me a crystallization point of actually where I'm organizing since years now. But what I learned there is really, particularly also coming from a feminist perspective, is that what we actually organize for is something we need to do in our everyday. Like that it's not something that is over there, but something that is part of our everyday. And this also starts with forms of caring, not just in organizing processes, but I don't know, like with the people you see around, right? And the kind of relationships we want to build with people. So it's really about reconstruction, not only about tearing something apart, but about building new. And the beautiful thing is that even this new, and this comes maybe back to the question of time, is not linear. Mm-hmm. There are parts of the new already in the past and in the present, right? You talked about the quilombos, mm-hmm. but we can also talk about marronage. All these practices where people refused systems and built societies based on forms of care and relation and relationality. And I think that's there, right? So it's, and that's there to build new worlds with what is already at hand. And we can do that from everywhere and from all kinds of positionalities. This is, of course, also bounded to various forms of responsibilities.
Sure.
But how can we live with the fact that we may never live to see the change ourselves?
I think, that's something I learned from an indigenous person in the US. If we understand ourselves just as part of the journey, then it's not about seeing the fruits, because we know we're planting seeds. I don't know if it's completely satisfying always, because I do sometimes think, like particularly engaging with struggles around people who were murdered by police, where you really see like, okay, families want justice now, and like, okay, this is going to take 20 years and it's not going to happen, right? But you still engage in the struggle, and maybe that's then also the part that the struggle itself is that journey. Although it can be hard, but I do think, hope we, particularly when we do it with care, that we also find love in that struggle.
Sure. Who is beside with you? Like who is by your side on the way? But it's really bittersweet what you said, actually.
Yeah. It's not fun. I mean, we all know it. It's really
bittersweet anyway.
And yeah, when it comes to issues where we really see it's pressing, right? Like when you talked about like questions of access to the, but that's particularly what I mean. Like, how can we talk about decolonize the university when it's like still it's not a popular university where people can like have access to, and that's, I mean, I get it to just say like, okay, how to engage when these struggles, when we maybe cannot even grasp the result.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think my point of view would be more like from the person's side of us activists viewing it as humans, because I don't think as humans we could always look at the bigger picture and think that we're part of a journey this human part of us that always asks, why me? Why couldn't I be that person? Why were we born kind of the same way, the same age, but the differences are very large? And I don't think we can be very much ideal about this thought. Like in an ideal world, we would be considered part of the journey and planting seeds. But in real life, we would always face the internal questions, the questions of why me, the self-doubt, all these things. So it's always like, how can we make it easier for ourselves so that we can keep going with it? Because being an activist, I don't think it's an easy thing.
No, it's not.
It's not the nicest hobby to have, to be honest.
No, it's exhausting.
It's not.
But I think we should also celebrate it more. Like, because when they are like minor, like, how can we say, I don't want to say results, but minor victories, to celebrate that and to try to at least create, because like coming from also histories of enslavement, it was unimaginable, right, to abolish that. But it was possible. And I think those who fought for it maybe didn't think, well, it will happen to me, right? Maybe I will not be a formally free person. Yeah, and I think it's contradictory in a way. I don't think it's fun job, but I do find a lot of love also in organizing and in movement.
Sure. Thank you so much for all of you. I think we have to open to the public, wherever they are.
I think.
There is no. Okay, there is no questions. So very happy to continue. Yeah, I think it's very important what you say, like to have joy, to have, and I think there, like this anti-colonial perspective or this perspective from the South, it's really important to bring it in. You know, like in Europe, you don't dance with God, you don't drink with God, you don't eat with God. I mean, we who have this tradition of this Afro. This tradition with this African matrice, and as well with indigenous matrice, we dance with the ancestors, we drink with the ancestors, we spend the most part of the time like talking to them and relating to. And in Europe, it's really funny because I just realized not long ago that you don't do that. The only notion of God people have is this God that don't dance, that doesn't come, that don't drink. And it makes a big difference of like having this kind of perspective where you are in a constant struggle, but you are as well cheering and you're as well collectively doing together. And I think the main motivation as well from the struggles of the South is not to have an ideal or epistemology or a very beautiful concept, is really resistance in order to survive and to maintain its way of being, its cosmology, and reensuring the continuity as well, like thinking about temporality. I like a lot recently, like we have different conversations about the humanism, what is humanism, what is this universal concept of human rights and so on, you know, like that they're really right. And I don't know, Jonas, I know that you have a good answer for that, like how it's for you, like this, how universal it's human.
I think first it's about Anthropocene, then most being a human, because Anthropocene, I think it was when everything started to separate, like we have the Anthropocene and you have the nature in the other side. And Anthropocene, it's the white supremacy, it's the same thing. And white cis supremacy. and they decided who is human and who is not human, I think. So I think we're not talking about the same humanity, because who can be human? I think a lot of people who are not white and cis, they are not considered as human beings. So at the same time, you can accomplish that, or you can just decide that you want to not being part of this humanity. You can get related to other kinds of ships, of kins, and not necessarily the same path of this humanity that is completely violent. And we're talking about nature, so what is natural? It's like, nature is a word as well, written by also a white man from Europe, from German maybe. And again, they decided what was natural and what wasn't natural. Like, and also who is the nature, what is nature and what is not nature. So I think this is also like a way to dominate. Like, if you can create this separation, I mean, you have the universal human being, the white cis male, and you have the nature. So everything that is not part of this humanity, it's the nature, so you can dominate it in the process of the coloniality. So I think it's like, in my work, I try to work a lot about the notion of ecology, but a queer ecology, disobeying ecology, because like that, ecology, it's like the science to study relationships. So I think creating dissident ecology, it's also to claim for the separation of this humanity and to create other kinds of ways to get related to non-humans and humans. And I think we cannot do that. We cannot do that with the same tools, as Oury said. Like, we cannot fight with the same tools that they taught us. We have to create our own. So yes, we have to reclaim another humanity. We're not being part of this one. I don't want to be part of this one. No. But yes.
I don't know if you want to react, Noor, like maybe creating another kind of humanity, another kind of institution, as you said, no?
I mean, Jonas mentioned something about who gets to decide what's nature and what's not, which kind of reminded me for a second of my childhood, where I always imagined that I've never seen nature in my life. Because my family used to live in a place that's surrounded by palm trees from all around. And I always thought that palm trees weren't part of nature because it's not what I saw on TV. Nature was always mountains and hills and something very green, while palm trees were always just brown. So it didn't make sense to me that I didn't live in nature. So now when Jonas was speaking, I was realizing that I did see nature, but I just didn't realize it. And I think that's the whole point of it, is that we were told something that it's not. And like you said, when you said you were a black feminist before you even realized what a black feminist is. So it's just had a flashback while you were talking.
Beautiful. Great. So, yeah, me too. I think it's as well, the words discharacterize a lot of what what we are seeing, like a form of, as well, destroying the forests. You know, it's not calling the forest, it's calling mato, grass.
Mm-hmm.
We have an expression like, let's destroy the grass, and you have a beautiful forest. You know, like this characterizate the space in order to consume the space, and as well this colonial process of capitalization of nature. Everything is buyable, everything you can buy, you can sell, and this Anthropocene, as you say, Jonas, I think it's really interesting to think like the perspectives we have on what is to be. We don't see humanity detached from nature as well, like, or we don't have a individual concept of rights, of a right to happiness. It's always a collective concept for some nations and in some perspectives. So I don't know if you would like probably to make a closing, because we're already exploring the time, and as I saw, there's no questions being asked. So I think we would.
Still no questions?
There are? No? Okay, so we could just do our closing. How it's for, I don't know if in our really small publicum we have here, do you have any questions? Sorry? No? Okay. We are very clear on everything. That's fantastic. The glossar of Tour de Lorraine was really helping. There is, I think, yeah, we have one.
Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
So the question is, Vanessa, Jonas, and you all seem fearless. Do you ever get scared?
Oh, I'm
Do you-
terrified right now.
Do you ever get scared, Vanessa and Jonas?
Me, yes, a lot, all the time. But oh la la. I think the fear is like the first step to understand that you are changing something. So actually, I like to feel fear. I'm fearing all the time because I know that I'm changing each moment of my life, and that I am reclaiming this change as well. So I don't think fearing it's a problem. I think it's you have to embrace as well what you are feeling, to understand and to deal with it, and then you can go on.
There's a song in which lyrics it says, "Everything that kills me makes me feel alive." So I think we function on pain at this time, because it's what, as you said, it's our way of survival. Doing this is because we have to survive. Also, because survival, a lot of part of it, it's pain. It's not a happy thing. So, yes, I'm terrified, not just because of the event. I'm terrified because sometimes I get the question of, what am I doing? Am I right? Am I wrong? Who put me in this position? Why do I have to do this? Why can't I just be normal? I think the question of why can I just be normal always gets, but then I ask what's normal and what's not, and then it goes endlessly, so. But I'm happy if you see me like that. Thank you.
It worked.
It worked, thank you.
Vanessa, fearless?
No, not fearless, not at all. I think there's so many degrees of fear, and yeah, sometimes I think it's important in terms of like reflection and think like, what am I feeling? Like, it's also sometimes a form of like reconnecting. Like, how are you doing? You know, when you like feel. But there's also these kinds of other fears of, I don't know, brutal institutions, or like, I don't know, when someone is really sick and you're like fearing over lives, then it's like, then that fear hurts, and it's really, yeah, and all kinds of, so there are various degrees, I think, to fear, and I'm definitely not fearless. Sometimes I'm even like just a bundle of anxiety.
Ouais.
I can relate.
Me too.
I'm happy the question wasn't for me. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for the people who are in the other side of the screen. I hope in the close future we could see each other again. I thank you so much, Vanessa, Jonas, and Noor for sharing this podium with me. I could stay the whole night. And I think the biggest gift that the Tour de Lorena could give to me, because I always wanted to talk to you all, like, and make questions. So it's a big gift. I wish to the Tour de Lorena as well lots of strength and courage to go on in the next weeks. Thanks so much for all the team. Thanks a lot for the translators that are really had a tough time in the last hours. I share with you I don't know if you want to give your last considerations.
I think Timo will say what I have.
Do you want to say the last words?
Thank you so much for inviting me here, and just do things. Do them. That's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation and for the translation and for the moment. I'm really happy to talk with you all. It's a great pleasure and an honor as well. And that's it.
And don't be grateful.
Vanessa.
Yes, thank you for the invitation and for such an inspiring conversation and to learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I pass the word to someone from the Tour de Lorena to make the last considerations.
Yeah, that would be me. I don't know, should I come? I don't like this So, first of all, I want to thank you so much, each and every one of you, for this inspiring podium and the powerful invitation you offered us. I think it was just amazing. Like, most of the times I was like, this is so good, especially when you mentioned Sylvia Wynter, because I'm struggling with a book of hers for like half a year now. So I was really happy. In the name of the Tour décolonial, I would like to thank you for your presence, for your knowledge and wisdom that you so kindly shared with us. And last but not least, for being the inspiring human beings that each and every one of you are. And I really mean that by heart. We would like to thank you not only for words, but also with a small gift. It's a small book about resistance. Unfortunately, you won't be able to read it because it's in German. I'm sorry. And then some color pencils, but we will... we will give it to you afterwards. And then to really close this podium, for me there is only one last thing left to say, something which is located outside the realm of words. I think everything that needs to be voiced has been said. As you also all said, like, there are a lot of words already, but we need to fill them. And what is left to say then is to act and to really practice. So with that, I would like to close, and thanks again for everything.
Thank you all. Are we still there?